Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel. So we're back for another one of the annual traditions. We've got the year in review videos and we start off with the first one. So part one is always the goals review, which I've done the last several years. It's usually a good way for me to kind of gauge where I'm at as far as the collection and then also give myself some targets for the new year. Now the reality is each year that I do this, I kind of recalibrate every single time because some years are different than others. You never really know for sure and you always leave yourself room with the reality that some things may change. This year actually turned out pretty successfully, all things considered. I will touch on a couple of the specifics. There were a couple of things there that were kind of last minute, kind of late. It wasn't so much that I needed to do them in order to complete the year, but it was one of those things where it was close enough. It was just something that I felt like, you know what, I want to get it off the list for this year so that I can start off fresh next year. And then next year, I think what we're going to find on this one is that we're going to be a lot more refined and more specific. There were some very specific considerations that came into it that didn't really play a role last year that this time around made all the more sense in order to do them a little bit differently. So let's use the slideshow here. We're going to use the same slides as last time around, but we're going to make some updates. So first, let's take a look at what last year's goals look like and how we did with those. So first one is all the set goals. That was what I put together from last year. And a lot of these will carry over from previous years. But if you're going to notice here as I go through them is that we actually had some pretty good success with this. So let me go through it. First one was the 2018 Topps Chrome UFC autograph set. That was one that has actually been a carryover for the last couple of years. It's something that I've been wanting to finish. And last year I did make a modification where I basically came to the conclusion that Mark Hunt was part of the checklist, but reality is I still haven't seen an example of that card. As far as I'm aware, it doesn't exist. So I took it off the list last year to make the full checklist 32 cards. As far as I'm aware, that is a complete checklist. The only card that was left was the Sean O'Malley. That was the last one that was remaining. It was just a matter of when I finally got around to paying for it. So I don't have it in hand yet as I'm talking to you right now, but it is with Ship My Cards and I have requested the shipment. If they manage to get it out in the next week, then probably it'll be in before the end of the year. But regardless, the card has been purchased, so it is off my checklist, and the 2018 Topps Chrome UFC set is complete. In the same vein, moving ahead here, we got the 1996 Topps Mystery Finest Refractor set. That's one that had been sitting in one of my binders. I was basically just down to the Barry Bonds. That was the last one that I had remaining, so I picked that one up. So that set is also complete. That puts us with 2 check marks. Moving on to the third one here, 1996 Finest Gold Refractors. That's one that I really thought I would make a lot more progress on this year. I did have a couple of different opportunities to try to pick one off, but I found they ended up going for a little bit more than I thought they would. I will probably make an adjustment to that, but regardless, I was able to pick up a handful of them, but I didn't make the progress all the way to finishing. But I am down to 10 for the checklist in order to get her done. Same vein with the 1963 Fleer baseball set. That's one that I'm doing with the set registry. They're all graded. If I was doing it raw, I probably would have already been finished, but I decided to add that additional challenge to it. My goal was to get to 55 of 67. I wasn't expecting to be finished this year, but I only ended up picking up a handful in the same vein, and I am at 44 of 67. And the last one here was also pretty successful. I wanted to get to 100 different for the 53 Bowman color set, which is the reason for the image on the right side there. And I actually ended up getting to 103 cards. So it was very successful, and that also is going to lead into the goal that I'm going to have for that going into 2025. But overall, I would say, we got 3 check marks out of 5. That's pretty good. I would say a pretty successful year overall. It's one of those things you target for it and you see what you can do. And then when I get over to the player collection side of things, it's kind of in the same vein. So we'll get into that. And I had some successes there as well. But 3 check marks out of 5 is not bad for a given year. So next up here, we got the player collection. We're going to keep the images the same as last year. I just reused a lot of the slides and just updated the numbers. But let's take a look at what we did. So the 2024 goals from the Medano PC was from the 95-96 to 99-2000 little subsection of my checklist. I wanted to get the wants under 70 different cards remaining. And as a result of the pickups I was able to do throughout the course of the year, I'm actually at 63, which is to say that now between that and the first year's ones, I'm actually under 70 cards needed for the entire first 10 years of his checklist. So that checklist is getting pretty small. And that is going to have an impact on my goals for 2025, but I'll get to that in a minute. The other 2 were also successful. So 2 more check marks here. I wanted to get the 2,700 unique cards. I ended up with 2,711. So just cleared that one, but I had about a little over 2,500 when I started the year anyway. So overall, very successful in terms of adding that. And again, I could go on eBay and with all the new sets that Upper Deck has released, I could go buy a couple of hundred cards and meet this requirement. I was trying to be a little bit picky and trying to find specific things that were interesting to me for specific parts of the collection that I really wanted to work on. Regardless, it was success, so we have another check mark there. In the same vein, the certified autos, I wanted to get to 330 different. That's an area that I really wanted to focus on in my collection, and as a result of my pickups, I ended up with 338. So again, I cleared that pretty comfortably. That's something, again, with all the new sets, it would be very easy to do if that's all I did. I wanted to try to find some stuff in the playing days specifically was where I was targeting a lot of these specific things. So with that said, pretty successful 2024. Managed to get check marks for the most part, which is really great. That was a little bit of an improvement over the previous year, But let's take a look at what 2025 looks like. We're going to do a little bit different. We're actually streamlining the set section of this a little bit because I was able to complete some, but that's at the same time, I really want to put the focus on a certain specific ones this time around. First one is the 1996 Finest Gold Refractors. My goal is now to finish the set. It was the same as last year, but this time around with a couple of less things on here, I'll be able to focus a little bit more of my attention directly on it. The Sean O'Malley's gone, and then the other refractor checklist that I was working on is also off of it. So now we're going to focus our attention just on that 96. I've got 10 cards to go. Even if I pick up one a month, I'll be done before the end of the year. So that's kind of what I'm shooting for. And I think that's a very reasonable target. I'll have to really pay a little bit extra for a couple of them in order to get it done. But I'm not going to be just throwing a big buy it now at the first one that I see. But I'll be a little bit picky, but I'll try to knock down the last 10 there, and that should be done by the end of the year. In the same vein, since I've got a little bit more focus now on this one, we're gonna try to move the 63 Fleer baseball up to 60. We're gonna try to get to within striking distance of finishing the set this year, and then probably shoot to finish it off next year. So we're gonna put a little bit more focus on that. Same thing with the 53 Bowman Color, but the difference is I don't necessarily need to finish the 63 Fleer because I want to finish the 53 Bowman Color set. So I want to make that the priority. And I've pretty much picked off a lot of the short prints and a lot of the star cards already for it. So it's kind of downhill from here. It's more kind of commons and semi-stars. So I think we can definitely get that done. 57 more cards before the end of the year. I think that's certainly doable. And I want to target specifically trying to get those singles. And if I manage that, I should be done that set before the end of the year, which would be a great accomplishment. It's a set that I've been looking forward to finishing. And now I think we're within striking distance in 2025 to get that one done. Now, with all the changes there in the set list, streamlining it a little bit, just focusing on the 3 sets, that means for the player collection, we've got a lot of the same stuff as before, but there is one major change that I made to it. My success last year actually meant that because that checklist was down to 63 for the 95, 96 through to 99, 2000, and the reality is I was looking at that checklist, and what I'm finding is that a lot of the ones that remain are becoming increasingly more difficult. I actually missed out. There were 2 that I actually had a shot at the last week or 2 that I was trying to get that would have fit under that checklist, and I was outbid on both of them. So it's clear to me that I'm going to have to be a lot more aggressive if I want to pick those up. But the point is, it's getting harder. A lot of the ones that are missing are stuff like superscripts, low numbered cards, some of the tougher pieces that I just haven't been able to come across. They don't come across on eBay all the time, and I don't see them every day. So it's one of those things where trying to come up with another number for that one might be a little bit difficult. I'm still going to target them, and if I can find one, I'm definitely going to be aggressive about it. But I think it was time to move on to another section of that checklist and something a little bit easier to pull off. So in this case, we're going to focus on 2000, 2001 to 2005, 2006, because that's the next 5 years of the checklist that we're going to target. The first 10 years are already pretty well documented, and at this point, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty on those. But the first 5 years of the 2000s are ones where there's still a lot of room to work here. So my goal for this one is to get the want list under 500 cards, which is to say there's still plenty of them on there. Currently, there's 546 cards left on that checklist. But even if I get it under 500, that would be almost 50 cards added to the Medano collection, which would be great. But then at the same time, it also means I'm making some inroads on the next 5 years. And I'd love to slowly whittle that down over the next couple of years and get it to a nice manageable level so that then we're 3/4 of the way through Medano's career, and then I've got most of the cards on that checklist for the playing days. Overall, in the collection-wise, I want to make my way towards 3,000. So the next step that I'm going to take here is I want to shoot for 250 plus unique cards. I'm currently at 2711, which is what we talked about a minute ago. And that means I'd be shooting for almost 140 cards in the year, which is a lot of cards. But at the same time, if I target about 50 in that one section, and then maybe grab some more of the newer cards and try to fill in some of the other gaps in between, I think it's doable, and it gets me closer to that 3,000, which means nothing other than just I like the number. I like the idea of it because then it's going to get slower building from then on in. And again, the focus will always be on the playing day stuff. So that's why I want to keep slowly making my way through the checklist. Same vein, certified autographs. I'm going to shoot for 375 different, which gets me close to 400. Eventually, at some point, I want to get to 3,000 unique Medano cards, and I want to get to 500 certified autos. But I got to do it in kind of these steps along the way. But the reality is, if I see a good deal and something that I can make work, then I'll certainly go for it. But I'm just slowly chipping away at these little subsections, and that's what kind of keeps it interesting for me as a collector, and it gives me these little targets to shoot for. But I'm trying not to be overly ambitious and just throw everything at it, because realistically, then it just becomes work at that point. Just checking the save searches constantly to try to find stuff to buy, and that isn't interesting to me. That has never been part of the way that I like to do my goals. I like to give myself these little targets to go for. It keeps things interesting, but then also leaves me the flexibility to find different things in my collecting that I may be interested in. I still collect other stuff outside of it, other player collections, but these are the ones that I focus my goals on because when it comes to the Brett Favre cards or it comes to some of the other player collections, I don't necessarily want to have targets because I just kind of look for whatever comes across. And if I think it's a good deal or it makes sense to me or something I really like, then I want the flexibility to be able to go get it. And that's basically the approach that I take to it. So with that said, that is another year of the collecting goals, recap of the 2024 stuff, and then talking about what I want to shoot for in 2025. So I don't know if this is useful to anybody. It's something, an exercise that I like to do every single year. And it's also kind of fun to see progress and then be able to shoot for these things. And it keeps a little bit of certain area of the collecting side in focus so that it allows me to have something to shoot for. And then at the same time, it also means I'm not just scrolling eBay endlessly and just randomly grabbing things. That will still happen from time to time, but it gives at least a little bit of a focus for part of the collecting so that I'm able to find these things and then be able to come back at the recap at the end of the year and be able to see how I did. It's still kind of fun to gamify it, at least at this point, and that's always kept things interesting for me. So with that said, that is part 1 of my 2024 year in review. The next couple of ones are usually the pickup video comes next, and then my state of the channel and plans for the 2025, and those will be the next couple of videos that I'll be recording through the course of the next couple of weeks before we call it a year. Otherwise, more videos coming up on the channel. Live streams are still going to be happening through the remainder of the year. More than likely, there will be a Christmas Eve episode and a New Year's Eve episode. I kind of have to figure out if there's anything else in between, but there will be episodes the rest of the way and a couple of more podcast episodes before the year end. Like if you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much, and we'll catch you in the next one.